Joining me now is Malcolm Davis, Senior Analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Good to see you again, Malcolm. First of all, let's talk strategy and what's happening in Ukraine at the moment, in particular with the Russian forces. There have been reports that Russia is making small gains in the east of Ukraine at the moment, but not extreme gains there. We've also seen reports of shelling in the Kiev region as well, even though Russian forces have generally pulled out of that region. And we've also had reports of missile attacks from Russian forces in the west of the country around Lviv as they try and slow down access points into Ukraine that could be carrying Western ammunition and weapons. Is that generally your take as well?
Yeah, it is. I think what you're seeing, firstly, in terms of the eastern offensive, the Donbass offensive, is the Russians are starting to learn from the mistakes they made earlier, the first phase of the war. They're starting to adopt a more gradual and methodical approach to their operations in the east. You have the Ukrainian forces that are pushed forward around Kramatorsk in a salient, which is basically a bulge moving forward in the front line. And the risk is that those Ukrainian forces will be essentially encircled by Russian forces moving south from the north and north from the south. So they pinch off that pocket and surround those forces. And I think this is what the Russians are about, is trying to close that salient to capture those forces. But at the same time, as you know, they're also keeping up the pressure elsewhere with missile and airstrikes into Kyiv and also Lviv, in particular, to try and slow down the flow of material support from the West.
So do you think that this is signs of a more organised and, I guess, prepared Russia?
Well, it certainly seems to be. They are only making incremental gains. And I think that that is because that essentially their morale, their strength, their logistic support haven't recovered from the drubbing that they got in the first phase of the war. So they can't sustain progress when they make progress. But you do have a new commander coming in, General Gerasimov, who is the head of the Russian military, is now taking on personal command of Russian forces in the east. And it could be that they're trying to get their command and control arrangements in order so that they have a better chance of having a coherent battle plan and utilising the forces they've got rather than squandering them in sort of attacks that really don't achieve the goals.
We've got Western countries, including the UK, sending in experts to assist war crime investigators into parts of Ukraine. At the same time, we've got Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, claiming that he's going to be attending the G20. We know that Russian President Vladimir Putin is not that keen on international law. What can be done about war crime analysis in the region and kind of convictions around that, but also at the same time, the G20?
Well, let's start with the G20 first. I think it would be highly inappropriate for any Western leader to sit across the table from Vladimir Putin at the G20. So if Putin does attend the G20 in Bali, then the Australian government should not attend, the American government should not attend, nor should any of the European representatives. And that would be a huge signal to the organisers of the G20 this year, Indonesia, that they've made the wrong choice basically by inviting Putin. I think a further step could be made, a little bit more difficult to do, is to remove Russia from the G20 on an indefinite basis. Now, the process of actually doing that would have to be worked out, and it's likely that countries like Indonesia, India and others would oppose that. But certainly we should not essentially allow Russia to enjoy the benefits of access to these diplomatic meetings after what's been happening. In terms of war crimes, look, yes, we'll do the investigations as we should, but don't expect any opportunity really to hold Putin to account. I think that it took a long time to come to a finding on the MH17 shoot down, and we still haven't brought those 4 Russians to account. So I wouldn't hold your breath on war crimes.
Just finally, Malcolm, while I've got you, we're getting reports coming through now that over the past 24 hours, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that they've been discussing a draft of a possible treaty between the two countries with the fighting, but also says that lifting sanctions imposed on Russia is part of the negotiations. Previously, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has said lifting sanctions is not part of the negotiations. Number one, do we believe Sergei Lavrov? And number two, does this show that the sanctions are really starting to work?
I find it difficult to believe that Lavrov really is being genuine here, because on the one hand, he's making this suggestion of a negotiation. On the other hand, you've got Putin most likely moving to a general mobilization of Russia on May the 9th during the Victory Day parade and declaring war on Ukraine. So I'm not really seeing a strong evidence that Russia is serious about negotiations. And in any case, lifting sanctions to me seems unacceptable when you still have the Putin regime in power. You're effectively allowing them to come into Ukraine, destroy the country, brutalize the population, commit human rights atrocities, war crimes, and then withdraw, and all things, all measures are removed. It doesn't work that way. So I think that you will see any negotiation really not going very far at all, particularly if Russia does mobilise on May the 9th.
Malcolm Davis, Senior Analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, as always.